I'm sorry, did you want music? Because my computer doesn't think we do.
I feel like I'm in one of those don't react videos on TikTok.
Gotcha. You're all getting punked.
I went to my place of Zen, I'm just like, can't laugh.
That is definitely 10 seconds. What is going on?
I don't know why I always hold my breath during the 10 seconds too, but I always do.
We're just gonna go. We'll edit all this out later because I don't know if we're gonna get it twice.
We never edit it out. It's ridiculous.
If we say we're gonna do it, we don't.
We don't.
That's how we roll.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sitting Ovation, a podcast about who the interesting people who work in theater are, what they do, and why they do it. We're your hosts, Bailey Sheehan,
Elizabeth Miller,
and Matt Farragassa.
We'd like to welcome you to our show, but before we get started, we'd like to take this opportunity to respectfully acknowledge that we are hosting this podcast from the traditional lands of the Lenni Lenape people, and we pay our respects to elders both past and present. Today,
you'll be getting to know Juliana Kilgore, a first-year student here at Lehigh University. Who is she? What does she do? And why does she do it? I'll kick us off with our first question after I stop the music. I'll get us started off with our first question. How did you get started in theater?
I grew up, of course everyone grows up.
Do they?
But I grew up, and my parents got divorced when I was about 3, but my mom was more of the sports person. My dad he'd done theater in high school. So growing up, my dad and I would go see shows all the time. It was kind of one of the things that we did, whether it was high school theater, community theater, professional theater. I wanted it all. So we'd see shows all the time. And of course, you get the song stuck in your head when you see a musical. So I really liked doing it. And then when I was about 10, I had the opportunity to audition at this community theater that I'd seen a lot of shows at. And I got in on my first audition, which I was looking back, that was actually a pretty big feat. I didn't really know it at the time, but I was really excited. And I was my first actual show, which is Miracle on 34th Street. And I was a reindeer. So it was really fun. And then kind of growing up, I've done theater there from the time when I was 10 to when I was 18. And I also did a few shows with my high school. And I got involved with things there. They were more about the acting side versus the community theater was a lot more, jazz hands and singing. So I was really grateful for both because it gave me this healthy balance of everything.
So you sing, you dance, you act, you were into musicals. Do you have any other kind of experience in theater? What else have you done?
So at the community theater, it's run primarily by a lot of volunteers, a lot of parents. And I've had the opportunity to help out backstage a lot of times. There were a few shows when I had to take the time off for whatever reason. And I was able to work backstage, moving sets, cracking jokes with the backstage dads because, it's a fun group. And I've done a few other things. I've helped out with music, which for the most part consisted of hitting a space bar at the right time, but, difficult stuff. And I've helped out with hair and makeup. I haven't helped out directly with costumes, and I've worked with props a little bit, especially with my high school because we had to do everything ourselves. You kind of get experience doing all these different things. And so I've gone out and tried to find props. I've brought things on from my own house. So I've done a lot of different things, but I'm still really excited to learn more things like lights or learn more about props and costuming and things like that.
So now you're here at Lehigh. You're with us in the Department of Theater. So what's your major at Lehigh? What plans do you have for your academic career here?
So I'm currently planning to double major in theater and environmental science. Theater is for sure. Environmental science could change depending on, what classes I take because I'm still undeclared as a first year. But those are the plans for right now. I hope to continue doing a lot of things in the theater department. Getting involved in different clubs and stuff, but that's the plan for right now.
And with this environmental science potential and theater degree, is there anything you want to do with that combination? Are these two separate passions, or do you hope that they can come together and merge at any point?
I mean, typically you wouldn't necessarily think of them coming together, and honestly, in theater versus movies and TV shows, things like that, they don't really. There's not necessarily a place for environmental science unless you're talking about being a lot more environmentally friendly, whether it's the set or figuring out a way to minimize waste and things like that. But I think that there's definitely a lot of potential, especially because it takes a village to put on a show, and even growing up in California, the movie industry is a really big thing there, and so I think that I could potentially even use it to, if they need some sort of consultant potentially, of, hey, we want to film this in New Mexico because that's really cheap for whatever reason, or they give us a lot of tax write-offs. But hey, we need it to look like it's in Colorado. We need it to look like it's in the mountains. There's always potential, especially I feel like things are a lot more interdisciplinary than you might think. And there's always a way to bring things together if you really want to.
I agree.
How did you hear about Lehigh? We know you're here, right? You're with us, and that we love that. But how did you end up here?
So the interesting thing is that I actually didn't even know that Lehigh existed until about October of last year, my senior year. I was applying to a lot of different schools. I knew some of the schools that I wanted to apply to. I mostly wanted to go somewhere far, and I wanted to have my own experience, especially because that's what my dad did when he was in college, and I feel like college is a really great opportunity to live somewhere that you might not normally live. I'd always kind of had my heart set on the East Coast. And so I was applying to a lot of different schools, and I was going through, one of those websites where it's like, what are some of the top schools? And I was looking for ones that were the right size because I came from a really big high school. We had about somewhere between 3,600 and 4,000 people. So I knew that I wanted to go somewhere that was bigger than that. I felt like, okay, if I'm living with these people, I feel like I'm going to get to know a lot of people, and I really want to be somewhere like that. But I didn't want somewhere too big, because I didn't just want to be, another fish in this giant ocean. So I was going through one of those websites. I came across Lehigh and thought to myself, this seems like a good option. And the more I looked into it, the more it seemed like something that I would really enjoy. And then when it came time to actually decide on what college I wanted to go to, one thing that really stood out to me about Lehigh is that they had a lot of Zoom meetings, because the pandemic was just starting and we didn't really know anything about what was going on. We didn't know how long this was going to last. I thought I was getting a 3-week spring break, but a year later, it's not spring break anymore. I noticed that in a lot of different Zooms, even ones that didn't revolve around the arts specifically, theater just kept coming up. People would talk about interdisciplinary and just say, oh yeah, like I remember President Simon talked about how his son just took a theater class, whether it was for gen eds or just for fun. A lot of people talked about just taking a theater class or going to see shows, and it made me realize that they seem to really value the theater, and they seem to really value the arts. They weren't just, a sports school like a lot of schools are, especially high schools. And so that was something that really stood out to me, and it really drew me to Lehigh when it came time to decide. Is just that they seem to really appreciate the things that I really appreciated, and they appreciated the well-roundedness of a student. They don't just want you to be smart. They want you to be academically driven and do theater, be academically driven and play Frisbee golf. They want you to be this well-rounded person instead of just being a human robot.
I love that. I'm not going to lie, Juliana, you just made my heart just burst with happiness. Like, I'm so happy to hear what drew you to Lehigh. And also, first of all, the theater got mentioned a lot, which is awesome. But also the desire to kind of promote the arts, and that's such a passion of ours, and I'm so appreciative of knowing that. So thank you.
What drew you to the podcast? What made you say that's what I'm going to do this semester? I'm going to spend some time doing that.
So I was really looking for a way to get involved. I remember on the theater site, it said, check back on August 1st for, upcoming auditions. And so I was sitting there August 1st, refreshing the page, and, it was a crazy year. So they didn't even know what was happening. And I joined the MNC group me because I figured, hey, this is a good way to get involved. I did ITS. For people who don't know, that's International Thespian Society in high school. It seemed like something that was kind of similar to that. And so I was like, hey, I'll join this. What could go wrong? So I joined the group me. And one day there was a message. I can't remember who sent it, but they said, hey, Cashy Johnson has this class, and it's going to be a few credits. It's kind of like typically how we would have performances, how we have this podcast series, and we're looking for anyone who'd want to join. But we need to know by midnight tonight. And so I called my dad and I said, "Hey dad, what do you think?" I was like, I don't want to overburden myself. I don't want to overcommit myself and then freak out because, college is a huge transition. And so I was like, "What do you think? I'm taking however many, I think it was 15 credits." And I was like, what are your thoughts on this?" And we were talking it through and he's like, "This seems like a really good opportunity. This seems like something you would really enjoy." I was like, "Okay, you don't have to ask, you don't have to tell me that twice." Then I ended up emailing Cassie and she got me into contact with Elizabeth and I was asking about what it kind of entailed because I've never worked on a podcast before. And
Did
now
you
I'm
listen
here.
to a lot of podcasts before?
Actually, no. If I'm going to be completely honest. Aside from potentially, assignments where we had to listen to podcasts, I had never really listened to a podcast before. And since then, this is the only podcast that I actually listen to regularly. Um, because, especially because it's so personal to my life. A lot of times podcasts, it's someone who's in the middle of Montana talking about some random topic. And although that's super awesome, this one is a lot more personal. Like, for example, the last episode of Mark McKenna, I'm literally in his class right now. And so it was really awesome to have that outside of class experience and get to hear, okay, I've seen Mark, as a professor. Where did this start? Hearing more about the origin stories or hearing about all of you guys, when I was working with you on the podcast, how you all got involved in theater. And then this semester, I'm working on the marketing for this podcast series. A little bit of a bigger responsibility, but it's been really fun and really fulfilling, I think.
And you're doing amazing at it.
Yeah,
by the way.
100%. Are you in Mark's clowning class?
I am, unfortunately, no, I'm not. I am just in the Theater 11 intro to acting class, but you can definitely tell. You can see the clowning background, especially when I was editing, for some of the promotions. You can see he has very vibrant, very big facial expressions and hand gestures, and you can really see, when you know about the clowning background, you can tell.
I just remember in that interview, there were definitely times I was like, I was going into clown, like I heard it and I could see it happen.
Yeah.
And you're also working with GPS this semester too, right? You got Cass in another upcoming production.
Yeah, I found out about last week. I got an email from Will, and he said, "Hey, by the way, we have this pre-recorded role, and we'd love for you to help with that." And I was like, "Yes, of course, I want to do this." So that's underway. Haven't done too much for that yet, but it's coming up.
Well, you really jumped in both feet with the department, so that's exciting. We're so happy. We're so happy to have you.
Yeah.
So you're a first-year student here at Lehigh, and it has been a very unique experience thanks to COVID for this entire year. So I'd love to hear what's that experience been like? Good, bad, ugly? Tell us what it's been like to be here.
I would say for sure, it is a year like no other. That is the best way to put it, in all the good and the bad ways. The college transition is kind of difficult, especially because, for me, I'm coming from across the country, and so I didn't know anyone. I barely knew about Lehigh. I actually had not stepped foot in the state of Pennsylvania until I flew into Philly to come to Lehigh. I actually ended up, because of COVID and because California was a hotspot state at the time, I had to quarantine for 2 weeks at the beginning of last semester. There are some different experiences. It's really interesting that everyone is in singles. I have some friends who have rooms that are the size of triples, but there's only one person. Yeah, and so it's created this really interesting dynamic, but at the same time, it's a very unique experience because at least first semester, it was only freshmen on campus. Everywhere you saw people, no one knew anyone. Especially the first few months, everyone was super duper social. You could go into the dining hall when they were open, just say, "Hey, is anyone sitting here?" And people would say, "Sure." And suddenly you're meeting 3 new people. There are also some bad things. Like, a lot of people have gotten COVID. I've been quarantined quite a few times. I actually got COVID really recently. There's the isolation and all of that stuff. It's also kind of interesting because first semester, we weren't allowed to go into each other's dorms. We weren't allowed to hang out aside from, "Hey, let's go to the library and study." Or, "Hey, let's grab our food and then eat outside somewhere while it was still warm." So definitely a very unique experience. But now that we're allowed to have other people, things are starting to loosen up, especially as COVID rates go down. So now we're able to go into each other's rooms. It looks like now we're going to be able to have indoor dining again, which is a great way to meet people. But I'd say it both helps to bond people because we're all going through this crazy, uncharted territory together. But also in some ways it's difficult because, there are a lot of feelings of isolation, and there are a lot of feelings anyway when you go into college, if you don't come with people that you know. And so there were definitely times we felt isolated, and I would call my friends from home, especially when I first got here, and say, "Oh my gosh, I miss you," and just try to catch up with people. But it also, like I said, it also gives us the ability to bond as a first year class because it's only us on campus.
Do you think that it's been a different experience during the fall semester versus this semester? Do you think it's changed besides the kind of like lifting of restrictions?
I would say that the lifting of restrictions definitely, I can see that it really has affected people. Last semester, especially because there were the first 6 weeks, there weren't any cases on campus. And then suddenly, cases started to come and they started doing surveillance testing and things like that. And so at the beginning, it felt like, okay, this isn't going to be too different from a regular semester. And then suddenly things started shutting down. And I know a lot of people went home for a little bit or went home for the rest of the semester just because they figured, okay, if I'm just going to be stuck in my room all day anyway, might as well just go home. But I'd say that this semester, because things are being lifted, there's definitely a lot more opportunities to interact with people. And although there still aren't necessarily club meetings or things like that on campus, because we're able to interact and, kind of have this somewhat of a normal college experience, it's definitely helped morale.
Yeah, it's felt very different even from my perspective as a staff and faculty member. So I was just curious. Thanks.
So a lot of people talk about all the negative things that COVID kind of brought us, but you had some really interesting things about like the positives of COVID and things that we should continue forward with after all this is over, quote unquote. So can you talk about some of the positive things that we like learned from COVID that you think we should keep moving forward with?
Well, one thing that I think is really nice, I mean, obviously this probably won't happen post-COVID. I know some people feel like it's invasive of their personal time because they can never get away from work. But I kind of feel the opposite. I feel like if I have a class and I realize, man, I really need a mental health day, I'm not in the right mindset for this class, I don't have to stand up in a lecture of 150 people and just walk out while the professor's like, what are you doing? You can just hit the leave meeting button, which I don't necessarily condone. But, sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need that mental brain break, especially, with exams and things. I also feel like it's definitely going to make education a little bit more accessible because right now we're all going to Zoom University. Luckily Lehigh is in person, so there are some in-person classes, but I feel like it's definitely going to help. There's a stigma right now, or in the past, I guess, about online university and things like that. And I feel like now that we're all having this immersive experience of doing classes online, I think that it's definitely going to help that stigma. And, for people who want the traditional college experience, they can go to college. But for people who either, they're a non-traditional student or they have some reason why they want to stay home, be it, some sort of health concern or just because they figure, okay, online classes work much better with my schedule. I want to work while going to school. I feel like it's definitely going to help relieve some of the stigma around that, which I think is going to be really good, at least for making education accessible to everyone.
That's awesome. I love that. I mean, it is so true. There's always, like you hear the ads for like, I don't know, like Phoenix University or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, anyone that's just a degree mill or something. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely valid having online classes, and a lot of people are really thriving taking their classes online and doing the schedule that they want, or not having to commute to work or not having to deal with other people. And a lot of people are really, really doing well with the schedule.
Yeah, it gives you a lot more time, especially, for people who are working or, from the perspective of someone who lives in California where the freeways are, during rush hour, they're kind of more like parking lots. It's really nice that people are able to spend this time with their family, especially people who I know sometimes it can be difficult for people with young kids because their kids can try to, come into the Zoom screen while they're having meetings. But I know that for a lot of people, it gives them the opportunity to have more of this family time and to have this better dynamic where you don't necessarily have to slave away a whole chunk of time commuting to work. You're able to just, close the computer and have family time.
I remember growing up, my father had like an hour and a half one way commute. That was mind blowing to me. I'm like, you spend 3 hours of your day just driving to and from work. I felt bad for him. That was his personal time, and he had to spend it in traffic So that's
Yeah.
totally changed this dynamic a little bit where a lot more is possible. And
hmm
I think companies are realizing that, and schools are realizing that there's so much more to be accomplished this way. And in that regard, it's been helpful.
I'm just going to throw in that I think that's helpful, but I also think it can be very dangerous, right? Because we don't even have that like 5-minute pause between meetings because it's like, I got to hop from this Zoom to that Zoom. And I think that it can also be like a runaway train. So as long as it's balanced,
Yes.
it's fine. And it is a great way. I mean, accessibility is a big, huge thing for that. But also just the accessibility of, do I need to be on screen? Can I be off screen?
hmm
Yeah, I've also had a couple days where I wasn't feeling well, and if I had to be in person, I would have used a sick day. But I'm like, I'm just sitting on the couch, like I can just work. I'm just answering emails and doing things. And there are times when that's been great because I'm not sick enough to stop working, but shouldn't have come into work. But then there's days where I'm like, I should have just wasn't even there. I was in a brain fog all day. I should have just used a sick day, even though I'm not. I'm sitting on the couch either way. So there is that, and I hopefully like once we hopefully we can stay in this hybrid, virtual, sometimes remote thing. It'll kind of taper out as people like figure it out more.
Yeah.
Great. I'm gonna bring us back to theater a little bit. So earlier you said that you've done it all, backstage, hair, makeup, sound, spacebar, right? So what would you say is your favorite? Do you have a favorite aspect of theater?
I would say the relationships. I know a lot of people say that, but I think also just this sense of community that you get whether it's on opening night, there's just some moment where I feel like things just sort of flip and you realize, wow, we did this. We have spent the last months, weeks, days, however long, putting this thing together, and we're actually doing this. This isn't just, while you're going through the rehearsal process, it's kind of just this theoretical dream that's going to happen eventually. It's like, yes, eventually we're all going to have this awesome experience where things are going to be on stage and people are going to come and see us. There's a moment when you realize, man, we have been putting in all this work. We did this as a community. We came together with all of our talents and we each put in different contributions, and together we created this wonderful thing. I know sometimes it hit me when I would be on stage, whether it's opening night or maybe the next morning, and there would be a moment where we're frozen. And when you're frozen on stage, you're supposed to be in the moment, but your brain kind of drifts. And I distinctly remember there was one show where I was frozen, and I'm just standing there going, "Wow, this is the life. This is awesome." We've really come together, and we're doing this. There are 300 people here to see us and everything we've created. So I think that's just the most fulfilling moment, is that moment of realization of, man, we really did that. We really put this whole thing together, and people are paying to come see it.
Especially because sometimes it doesn't feel like you're gonna get there.
Yes, I've had some shows where it hits early and it's like, wow, we're on top of things. We still have a few more days of tech week, and sometimes you get to opening night and you're like, man, I really hope this goes well. I really hope this quick change happens.
You can always use another week or 8, right? I mean,
Yeah.
something you touched on the other day too. I want you to talk about is you said it's awesome to see people step into the light and come into themselves.
Yeah. I think for me, growing up in a community theater, especially one where it was a children's theater, and so every single year you see graduates move on, go on with their life. A lot of people don't end up doing anything with theater for the rest of the time. That's their theater experience. They go on to be, nurses, or to be, I know a lot of people became nurses, or they move on to become, some people still work in the arts industry, some people work in directing, but everyone sort of just takes all these different paths. But the awesome thing is that growing up, I would see people who were very shy, very quiet people, very reserved people. And then one day I'd be looking at the cast list, and they'd have a big role. I always had faith in people, but sometimes, I was like, okay, this person's really shy and they have to play this very larger than life character. How is that going to transition, But one awesome thing is seeing that when people are given that opportunity, people step up to the plate. There were a lot of people in the classes above me where I would know them when they were in ensemble with me, and then I'd see them in this show, and they might have a few leads, and I go, wow, that person they got this opportunity and now they're really doing well. I didn't even know this person could do something like that. And I saw it with people who were my age as well. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it with the kids who are younger than me. I've seen a few of them this year step up. After my class graduated, they've been doing, virtual shows. But I've been seeing a lot of them step up to the plate and have these roles that they wouldn't have had when we were there. It's just, you feel so proud because you see this person grow up in theater, and a lot of times people see the end result, but people don't necessarily notice the little mouse number 3. But when I was in theater, I saw them when they were playing an ensemble role, and then I'd see them get, a supporting role or a featured role, and then suddenly they make it to being a lead.
Mouse number 1.
Living the life.
So you come from community theater. Now you're here at Lehigh doing some college theater and theater adjacent type things like this podcast. So what goals do you have for your theater career? Are you heading off to Broadway as soon as you graduate college, heading to Hollywood?
I think for me, my goal right now is to become a theater educator. I'm planning to continue doing, maybe going to graduate school for theater. But as much as I'd love to say, yeah, I'm going to be the next Broadway star, my name is going to be there in lights. People are going to come just because I'm in the show. Honestly, I'm not very good with big cities. And also, I don't know that I have the grit to get through that. And, I love theater, but I feel like it could become a very toxic situation very fast if I put myself in that situation, because getting so many no's, hoping for that one yes, and you might get a yes and then suddenly you injure yourself or something, and it's one of those situations where you're consistently putting in so much work, and I'm totally fine with putting in the work, but I feel like I could do so much better by helping other people fulfill their dreams. I know some people where I look at them and I go, yes, this person is very committed to theater. This person is, they're putting in everything. They're putting in their all. They're putting in 110%. And I didn't even know they had that much to put in. You don't have to be a big person to make a big difference. You don't have to be this huge person with a huge following and, have millions of people following you on social media. Sometimes you just need to make one difference in one person's life and you can change it. Really, that's kind of the moment that college is realizing, okay, you're coming into being an adult and it's, what am I going to do with my life? What path? I have all these opportunities, and people talk about the world is, your oyster. I think that for me, it would be so much more fulfilling to help other people realize those dreams than try to put myself through a really difficult situation of auditioning all the time. And I think that it's also really fulfilling to see other people, step into the light, like I was saying earlier, and seeing people grow. I would love to just help foster that in students, especially people who don't know theater. There are people who come take theater classes because they figure, I'll just get my general education things out of the way. But I know people who've done theater just because they figured, why not? And then they end up really loving it. So I think that would probably be the path that I hope to take at the moment.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people outside of theater just assume everyone is like, Broadway, here I come, but it's not. There's so many paths, and it's so fulfilling seeing people discover their love of theater. I think that is amazing. I'm sure Matt and Elizabeth will both, as we're all theater educators.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
That was me. I started theater just to get through college with a degree. I was like, whatever, I'll get a theater degree. It'll be easy, right? And then, and I ended up loving it, and I've made a career out of it. But I was totally in that I'm just going to check these boxes and I'll get out. But it became so much more for me.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Matt.
Let's
are you
see.
ready for? Are you ready for the cue?
This could go one of two ways.
Does everyone have their giggles out? We can't giggle during dramatic piano.
No giggling.
Did you even ask for it? Should I?
I didn't, but that's okay because it works.
I faded it out.
Oh.
We can do it again.
Bring it back in.
I'll bring
All
it
right.
back in. Do you want to ask
Julia,
for it? Are we?
No giggling and no interrupting the piano. Those are the two rules.
I think we've also learned we shouldn't interview at the end of the day on Friday.
I think it's Matt hosting is the issue.
That 100%.
stand by with dramatic piano, please. And dramatic piano, go. Juliana, I'd love to know, what does the world without art look like to you?
I think that it looks like a world that has very little empathy, or a lot less empathy. Because art really brings out people's emotions, and especially theater, you get to see stuff from a one-on-one situation where you're kind of seeing a slice of life of what someone's going through. And I think that as an actor, you have to have the empathy to stick yourself into this person's life and their body and their situation. When you experience theater, you're kind of just looking in on someone's experience. I feel like it really helps people to feel empathy, because you can look at things from a holistic perspective and go, okay, yeah, people experience this problem or what have you. But when you see it on a 1-to-1 ratio, you get a much better understanding for it. And I think art also encourages people to think about others, even visual art. A lot of times you see these protests or things that happen, and people have art that they've created to express their feelings. And without art, the world would be very bland. Art just brings color into an otherwise black and white world.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Wise beyond your years.
I know. Even during the pre-interview, everything she said, I was like, wow. I want that on a message with like a kitten hanging off a branch, like hang in there, but it's like
natural born educator.
Yeah.
How does working in the arts change your perspective of art when you go see a show?
I think it really gives me an appreciation when I see a show. Sometimes I'll go into shows and I'll just appreciate the show for what it is. Sometimes I'll go into shows and I'll go, wow, those lights, that looks really good. The way that they blended those, ooh, makes me so happy. Or I'll see a quick change. I'm like, they nailed that. That was, I know they practiced that, especially when you see transformation scenes like Cinderella or something like that. Sometimes I look at things and I'll see, ooh, I know they worked on that. And I know that they are so happy. They are ecstatic inside that it worked. And then sometimes, I just see a show and I just appreciate it for what it is. I've recently gotten a much better appreciation for even things like composers and lyricists and people who write their books. Because a lot of people go, oh, it's so easy to make a musical, to make a play. But when you actually sit down, it's not very realistic. You rate these characters and it's pretty one-dimensional, but these people create these very realistic situations. And it's awesome, especially because I've read some good scripts and I've read some scripts that were a little subpar. And so I feel like the more I get into theater, the more I have an appreciation for things outside of what I do or outside just the story.
She's so polite. I like how all of us were like, yeah, we see a show and we're like, that's wrong. That's wrong. I can see people in the wing. And she's like, I like that you can see that it worked and they're really happy about it.
And I also just enjoy the show sometimes, right?
Yeah. I know the scripts are subpar. Some scripts are bad. There are some bad scripts out there.
Yeah, in high school we did this thing called Play of the Month, where our teacher wanted us to get introduced to different plays so we could read whatever. And she kind of got wise to the fact that one time someone said, I'm doing a Play of the Month on The Lion King, So we started having to read actual plays, and she wouldn't tell us what play, we just find them. I found some really great plays because of that, but I also found some plays where I thought, man, I would never perform this. If they offered me a role, I would probably decline because I'm not sure that this script is worth my time.
Good. That's important. That's important to know.
So a follow-up to that then is, in what way has being in the arts impacted other areas of your life?
I think it's really helped me just to see, well, first of all, to be hardworking. That if you want something to be good, you got to work hard for it. Because you can try to throw together a show, but, I feel like we've all been a part of a show where we go, ooh, this is kind of a train wreck. And we've all been parts of shows that are really, really good and everyone's putting in their best effort. Also, the whole empathy thing, I think it's really helped me to be able to communicate with people. And going off of that, it's really helped me to, in other areas of my life, like public speaking. I've had some friends who say, oh, why should I take a theater class? I'm not a theater person. And I just tell them, it helps you in other ways too. It helps you with realizing there are some things where my theater one teacher in high school told me, when people are nervous, they do this actor shuffle or they do this mannerism. And so now when I see people public speaking, I can tell that they're doing this mannerism. And, I work really hard to not do them. And it's really helped me with public speaking because I can kind of put myself in a situation of I'm playing a character who has to give a speech instead of, hey, it's Juliana, I'm telling you about whatever. And it's really helped me also, growing up with a lot of, adult figures in theater, a lot of people my age have difficulty talking to adults, like adulty adults. I know we're 18 now, but people who've actually, lived some more life than we have.
Adulty adults.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down.
But
am I an adulty adult? Wait,
I need a real
what's
adult.
The limit?
Not me. Yeah,
I don't feel like an adulty adult sometimes.
I don't know. It's a very gray line, but
An adult who's adulted more than I have.
Exactly. An adult who's adulted more successfully.
But I'm definitely not an adulty adult.
But
I've been doing it longer, probably not more successfully. Right?
But for me, I don't really have problems talking to adults and saying, hey, or sending an email. I'll talk to adults and say, hey, just wanted to reach out. And also, for any students who are listening, take advantage of the fact that you're a student. If you say, hi, and you say, I'm a student, my name is blah, 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 and I'm a student at, people will help you so much if you say you're a student. Because they think, oh, poor child, oh, we won. But yeah, it's really helped me with communication with people, even people who intimidate me. We all have that person who we're like, man, that person scares me and I haven't done anything wrong. But you just sort of have to realize they're also a human. People aren't that scary.
You had mentioned something too about job interviews.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about that?
Sure. Theater's also helped me with that because sometimes in shows things go wrong. You got to improvise. And when you go into interviews, you have no clue what they're going to say. They might say, if you were any color, what color would you be and why? Sometimes people ask some really unique interviewing questions. And theater has definitely helped me to, think on the fly and improvise. And it's really helped me learn the ways that I can calm my nerves and the ways that I can accentuate them. I get nervous before shows still. I have a younger sister, and she asked me one time, she said, how long did you do shows before you started not getting nervous? And I said, I still get nervous. I could feel 100% prepared, and I'm still standing in the wings right before saying my line, saying the other person's line too, just going through everything. There's not really a moment where you get less nervous. It's just you kind of, in theater, when you step on the stage, all of your nerves go away, unless you have stage fright. But if you're like me, all of my nerves go away when I step onto the stage. And for interviewing, it kind of has become the same thing. And when I go in, I'm like, okay, this person wants me to be successful, is honestly, at the end of the day, the big thing. This person, they hope that I am the best person they see all day. They hope that I am the next best person at this company. I am the next best intern, the best whatever, the best delegate for this thing. They are rooting for me. And it's the same thing with directors, honestly. It can seem daunting. It seems like, oh, they're looking for reasons to not pick me, but give them reasons to want you. Give them reasons to go, that is the person I need. I want that person here. That person has a lot to contribute. And realizing that people are on your side changes your whole perspective, because instead of being this daunting thing of they're looking down on you, they want you to be awesome. They hope that you are successful. People are really on your side.
I love that.
Yeah.
You said that during the pre-interview, and it was so profound to me that, and it, of course, it makes so much sense. Yes, the director hopes that you walking into the audition room, that you are the most successful person. That would make their show better. It's it blew my mind when you said that about giving yourself the benefit of the doubt. Astounding. It floored me. It floored me.
And even if you mess up, there are times when I've gone into an audition and things have messed up, whether it's my control or not my control. You just got to own it, because they also want to see, okay, if something goes wrong, how are you going to react to that? Are you going to get flustered? Are you going to freak out? Are you going to start crying immediately? you know, you got to take criticism in theater. Sometimes it's not even criticism, it's just notes on, hey, how about you try this instead? And you got to be ready to change things at a moment's notice and go with the flow. You know, if you do mess up, taking advantage of that and owning it and going, yeah, I messed up, but guess what? I'm the best messer upper. You know, I am going to make this so great. It's going to be the best thing you've seen. I'm going to do an awesome comeback.
You made a choice. You made a strong choice and you followed through.
Exactly.
And that's half the battle, is making that choice. For better or for worse, just make a choice and commit. Like,
Yes. Yes.
Does that say adulty adult? What is that?
It's the best messer upper.
I'm an adulty adult.
I love that, Julie. You are God. Dropping
Right?
the like knowledge is like insane.
I think she's the adultiest adult in the room, honestly.
This, exactly. I was just gonna say that, Bailey. I was just like, she's so smart. No wonder you're like a natural born educator. You are just thriving as wow. I'm blown away.
Right? I feel encouraged after this conversation.
Right?
I'm gonna go do better at life now. Like, that's
Best messer upper.
yes.
She's like secretly judgy somewhere else, though. You know, like she has one thing that she gets super judgy about.
Scripts. No, I'm just
Hey, as long as it's not yourself, you're good.
And I can attest to that feeling of nervousness that never goes away. Like
Mhm.
I've called the Nutcracker like over 100 times. And every time I get to the same like big part of cues where the whole house transforms, my palms sweat. Like I always get nervous. And to me, that signifies that I deeply and passionately care that this is going to go the way I want it to, so that the audience's experience is, you know, with me on like, perfection is not a thing. Okay, let's retraining that part of me, but you know, like to provide that best entertainment value. And so yeah, I don't think it ever goes away.
Mm-hmm.
If it does, something might be wrong.
Yeah. One time I was talking to my dad and he said, you know, people start to mess up when they think they're not going to mess up, when they get too confident. So never get too comfortable. You know, sometimes you have 2 show weekends and by the second weekend you're like, I got this. And then suddenly you're on stage and forgetting your lines. So you should never be too comfortable, because that's a scary place to be.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm too confident, I'm like, what am I forgetting? What important part of my life have I just completely ignored this whole time? That
should
like
not feel this comfortable.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Something's wrong.
Is the iron on? What happened? What have I done?
Yes.
So how do you want to impact the world, and what legacy do you want to leave behind? And you mentioned again something very profound about your production of Tuck Everlasting, and I would love for you to talk about that as well.
So I guess overall, the thing that I would like to leave with the world is I want to be a light. I want people to be happy. I want, you know, I have a lot of friends who are dealing with mental health issues, who are depressed, who are they feel like life is beating down on them. And I think life is such a wonderful blessing. You don't have to be here. You're here. And as morbid as it sounds, you know, you're making a choice to be here. You're making a choice to continue going. I think that happiness is definitely just something that I want that to resonate with people. And that when people think about, you know, our interactions, I want them to think about it in a happy light, because, you know, your legacy doesn't have to start when you die. Your legacy can start right now. Right now is the legacy you're going to have, and kind of transitioning into the story of Tuck Everlasting. So last January, you know, January 2020, the beginning of all sorts of the madness that is 2020, in my community, there were these 6 boys, and long story short, 3 of them ended up, they got into this car accident because this guy got really upset with them, and he rammed into their car. And then their car went off the road, and 3 of them ended up passing away, and they were 16, and all 6 of them had gone to my church at one point or another. And one of the 16-year-olds who'd passed away, he had a sister who was in my grade. It really shook my community, because these 3 boys, they each went to a different high school. One went to my high school, one went to a rival high school, and one went to a high school in our neighboring city. It really changed people's perspective, because you realize, as a high schooler, as a teenager, you think, man, I am invincible. I have my whole life ahead of me. But sometimes you don't. And around that same time, we were doing Tuck Everlasting. I think I had auditions for Tuck Everlasting the weekend before they passed away. I was cast as May Tuck. For people who don't know the story, it kind of just deals with this idea of everlasting life. There's a whole line where basically the father of the family says, "You don't have to live forever. You just have to live. Don't be afraid of death, because if you don't die, then are you truly alive?" And you can imagine, if you live forever, then life becomes kind of meaningless. It's meaningful because it doesn't last forever. You're not on this earth forever. And so I think that show was exactly what we needed at that time. It opened on the first weekend of March. So luckily we were able to do the show. The second weekend we had to minimize our audience numbers, but if it had been even a week later, we wouldn't have been able to open the show. In a way, it was really a blessing because we didn't know that we needed that show at the time. And normally my community theater did very, just the happy jazz hand shows like, Guys and Dolls or Cinderella. They do the shows where, it's happy. You're there for the ride. You have fun. You can bring young kids to it. They enjoy it. The music gets stuck in your head. But Tuck Everlasting has great music, a great script. I recommend everyone go watch it if they haven't. It's such a great show, and the characters are so deep and really just talking about life and this idea of living forever versus appreciating the life you have. It's this very profound concept. Like I said, I think it was the exact show that we needed at that time. We didn't know it, but I think it was exactly what we needed.
It's so powerful. It's like,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
and that was the last show you did at that community theater, right?
Yeah. I remember the last show, I told myself I wasn't going to cry on stage, but I kind of, right before I went on stage for like my last scene with the girl, at one point we say goodbye to her, and she has to make the decision of, does she want to live forever? Does she want to live a mortal life? And when I went to go hug her, I just started tearing up, and everyone apparently backstage started tearing up too. But it was this moment of, okay, this is going to be, they don't really give people lead and then lead back to back. And we were supposed to do Frozen in the spring. They ended up postponing it, so they just did it this year. Going into Frozen, it's a very happy, jazz hand show. I thought, okay, this is my lasting impression. This is my legacy at Cat of Corona. It was a very powerful moment, especially because we didn't know what was happening in the world. Like I said, I think part of us knew that things weren't going to be the same for a little bit. And I think it was just great to have this final normal moment and this final normal closing cast party.
That's great timing. All of the timeline of everything that you just described is so powerful. Like the impact must have been, even like looking back, it just must feel really like, wow.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've heard that beautiful story
Yeah.
and sad story, gosh, do you have any jazz hand stories maybe, or, anything fun to tell us about? I have some notes here about Mrs. Mears.
Oh my goodness. So for context, I grew up in this community theater. I felt like I wasn't being seen, and the class above me had like 20 people, and my class had 6. And I felt like I was kind of overshadowed, but Mrs. Mears was the first like lead role I had. And I figured, okay, they somehow trust me with this. This character, just for context for anyone who doesn't know, basically the show's set in the 1920s. This woman is, man, she's a handful. She's basically a white failed actress who is pretending to be this kindly Chinese woman in order to orchestrate human trafficking. So, not a good person, very much a bad person. Everything about her is not redeemable, which is kind of good in a sense, because if there was something redeemable about her, it might make the other things seem redeemable, and they're not. But I had some great memories from that. One of my favorite memories was that one of the backstage dads, and I was, I'm friends with the backstage dads because I helped backstage, and my dad was one of the backstage dads, and none of them heard my fake accent until that week. So I go on stage and I'm like, hello, like, I'm Mrs. Mears, right? He bust up laughing. He could not stop laughing. It was kind of like sometimes, how Matt in podcast episodes, how he'll just start laughing and, it just keeps coming.
That's never once happened. That's never.
You're right.
We can prove it. Though. There's proof.
But, it was kind of like that. And so I just hear out of my, the peripheral hearing, I just hear him laughing backstage. And so I had to tell him, I started telling him, hey, you need to go out the side door and you need to go hang out there while I have this scene, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to, keep a straight face. After that, he had to go out, and it was, I would see him just backstage and he would just start laughing. It was just this great thing because I really like to make people laugh. Just hearing this huge, larger than life laugh backstage during the shows, or when he came to see the show in the audience, it was a great opportunity. And just to make it clear, I am not condoning the racism of this. The whole point was to show that racism is absurd. She's a very bad person, so it was a unique experience.
I also have a note about the Rockin' Lockin'.
Yes. So at my community theater, we had this thing that we do every single June. And you can do it the year you're about to go into freshman year, or the year that you're about to go into college. So basically, all the high schoolers, and this is the best part of my year. I no joke. One time I had Rockin' Lockin' on my birthday, and I was so excited. Basically what happens is they give us this script, and it's a predetermined script, and we perform shows that we couldn't normally perform. Whether it's because the rights aren't out, or because it's a show like, Spring Awakening, where there's no way we're going to do that during a normal season. And they change it. There was one year when Spring Awakening was one of the shows, and, they had to change it a little bit, tone it down. And we have to do everything. Aside from writing the script and having songs predetermined, we choose when to cut the music. We choose the harmonies. We self-choreograph, self-direct, self-cast, costuming, hair, makeup, everything. We do everything. Now, granted, it's not this fully fledged show. It's a 15-minute adaptation of this show that we couldn't normally do. But we have about 24 to 36 hours to put it together. We come in usually it's a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. We go until 3 a.m. Then we sleep from 3 to 9 a.m. And then we have the rest of that day to figure out what we're doing. And at about 6 p.m. that night, we perform. And I had some great memories from that. You can imagine the things when it's 3 a.m. and everyone's just exhausted. The things that happen, and then we'd go to sleep, and for some reason, every single year, the guys decided it would be a great idea to live stream on Instagram. All of us girls would be sitting, in our beanbag, or not our beanbags, in our sleeping bags, in this one dance room, and then we all get a notification, this person is live streaming, and then we're like, oh, what is Ryan doing? What's Josh doing? And so we'd watch it, and it's 3 a.m. at this point. It's teenage guys. They're doing whatever goofy thing they're doing. But I just had so many great memories of, coming together to perform this show. That's all sorts of crazy. MNC, if you're listening, we should do something like this. I know Bailey said they did something similar to this when she was at college. So if we could do this, that would be great.
Yes, my college had a 24-hour play festival where you had 8 hours to write a show, 8 hours to do something else, and then 8 hours to perform it and get all the props and stuff. And it was super fun. I wish we did so. It's such a good bonding thing because the stuff is never good, but it is good because of the memories attached to it.
Oh yeah, there are some shows where I can't hear the songs anymore. There's a song from, we did School of Rock, and they're like, kick some ass, but we had to go kick some ass. And so, whenever I hear that song and I'm playing it in my car, I just go kick some ass. But we just have some great experiences from that.
See, this is the part of theater that people don't always know or understand how much of a community it is and how much it really embeds itself in your soul, which is so corny to say, but you can't escape it. You're gonna hear that song 20 years from now and that's what you're gonna think of.
Oh yeah, for sure. And midnight Denny's runs after the show and showing up in full hair and makeup.
Oh
and
yeah.
People are looking at you did you just learn how to do makeup? We have very extreme, our Ben Nye,
We used to practice our rapier dagger and our broadsword battles for stage combat over on the lawn of the business school.
I love that.
Always on the lawn of the business school. They either hated us or were like, what the hell are these weird people doing? Or why is my class not as fun as that? That was amazing, right? They have broadswords. What is going on?
Yeah. I've recorded a few things in my dorm room before I realized that the practice rooms were open. And I would have to text my hallmates and say, just so you know, I'm recording a monologue. I promise I did not eat the divorce papers with ketchup,
Yeah.
not that one, but whatever the weird context was of like, I hate you, you're an awful person. And I'm like, I promise, acting.
I would love to see you as like an angry, mean character. Like I can't picture it, but because like I'm sure you have it in you, but like I would love to see you like yell at someone. That would be really
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, there was a monologue last year. We were supposed to go to this festival. That was this huge thing. But of course, it was the weekend after everything shut down, so we couldn't have it because it was like it was like 100 schools.
Was it the International Thespian Festival?
It was not, but it was at this community college, and I think it's the biggest one on the West Coast. I had this one monologue that I was supposed to do where I was just like a really troubled person who was going through a lot of crap, and she's like in this depressive mood and like cursing at people, and so it's funny to play someone that I don't necessarily relate to, but it comes down to empathy, stepping into someone else's shoes. How do they feel? Why are they so troubled? Figure out the backstory. You're kind of like a therapist. You're figuring out what's the root of this problem. Why are they like this?
You have to step into this role of something that you're not typically used to doing or acting in that way. And all of a sudden it's like, how does that change you? And do you walk away with more empathy when you're done? Like it's this acting thing we do. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah. I think everyone should try acting at some point, because I know a lot of people who say acting, it's so easy. And I'm like, hold up, Brett. Like,
Brett.
Yeah. People are like, oh yeah, you just say words. I'm like, no. You have to think about, the subtext.
And if it's so easy, why don't you just go do it? Right?
Exactly.
I haven't seen you in the show.
Exactly.
That's why we pay all those TVs and movie stars just pennies, because
Right.
it's so
Yeah.
Anybody can
anyone.
do it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's a whole bunch of words strung together that you have to know, like you've memorized, right?
Mhm.
It's on top of it all. And you're going to remember to like mix that drink at the right moment and walk over there and do this and that and the other.
There were sometimes I would know my lines, like I knew what they were, but the order was sometimes a question.
Yes.
So very important, right?
Yeah.
Matt, that is your line, but like 3 pages from now.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Or what if your scene partner forgets their line? Then
Mhm.
it's not just you saying your next line. You have to be like, bring it back now. Like
Yeah.
we're gonna get back together.
That's something in your pocket. I think it was a gun or something. I'm not really
Right.
sure.
How do I get you back to where I am? How can we
Yeah.
be?
Yeah. Yeah.
Stage managers love that. We love that. Oh shit.
I had to perform my Theater 1 class, and Theater 1 in high school, a lot of people are there just to get their performing arts credit. And I had this one guy, and he was not committed to this whole theater thing at all. And I was very concerned that he was going to know his lines, but not in the right order. So I made a Quizlet, and then I put it on shuffle so that I would know, like, based on his line, what my next line was, and then I could figure it out.
That's
And I was
awesome.
like, well,
I'm prepping for any scenario, right? Like,
Yeah. I was genuinely worried.
I worked at a professional theater, like professional actors, big deal theater. And we were doing a show, and the lead did not know the order of his lines. He knew like the gist of what the message he was trying to say was. And then we had to bring in the caption board for our captioned performances. And we were like, just so you know, literally nothing that you're saying matches like the lines that are going across the caption board and he's like, but it's important that I get the message. And we were like, I think August Wilson would disagree, but sure. The message is more important than, I don't know, the script.
I can do it. It'll be fine.
Best Mr. Upper.
That's right. I'm the best gist knower on stage. All right, I got one last question for you. As we all know, we do have a global following these
Huge.
days.
Yes.
Global.
4 different countries, at least.
International stars.
Oh yeah.
So, do you have a message for the world?
I mean, I've had a lot of messages today. I'm trying to think about something profound. I got to step up, embrace everything, enjoy theater, make sure that theater is part of that everything, because theater is one of the best things that you'll ever find. It's one of the best communities. People are really accepting, even if you're new and you just tell people, yeah, I'm new, I have no clue what I'm doing. People are always willing to help you. Theater is just such a great community. So if you're not doing theater, Ask yourself, why not?
Love it.
So I have a question. I realized.
Uh-oh.
Can I join the commune?
Oh,
How did we not bring up that? You're the leader of the commune, Juliana.
I realized I was going through some of Mark's interview for promotional stuff, and I was like, oh, I have to join the commune.
I think you're like our commune guru. Like you have to sit on the top of some mountain in Costa Rica, and we have to like come up to you and be like, bestow your words of wisdom on us, and you're like, mess up and like own it, bro. I don't know what you want me to say. And I'm like, oh my god, thank you, Guru Juliana. And like I walk back down all enlightened. That's how it'll be.
Yes, I'll sit at the top of the mountain, just like, oh.
That's exactly, yeah.
State.
Yeah. I think that commune's actually centered around Juliana now. Like, it's become a little bit more cult-like. We moved back into cult, but
yeah, that's definitely cult-like.
I mean, what's the difference, really? It's just a matter of perspective.
That's what I've been
You're
told.
allowed to leave if you want, I guess. Gotta drink the spring water. It's my callback to Tuck Everlasting.
Yes.
Oh, well done. Well done. Our adults here, are we?
Who? Which one?
One in the corner. Yeah.
I'm the messiest messer-upper, the bestiest messer-upper? What's the word?
Best messer-upper.
The best messer-upper, okay. That's
I'm the best Pate note maker.
Just play the music, Matt.
That implies that it's going to work if I hit the button. All right, that time. We got lucky that time. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Juliana, for being our special guest. And thank you to Lehigh University Department of Theater for sponsoring this podcast.
Our podcast season looks a little different this year, so make sure you're following us on social media to play fun trivia games about past episodes, get a sneak peek behind the scenes, or to be alerted when new episodes are coming out.
You can follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search LU Theater, that's theater ending with an R-E, LU Theater Podcast Series, and on YouTube. All our past episodes are available on the Lehigh University Department of Theater channel. That's a lot of words to say. We'll catch you next time.
Bye!
Bye!
I guess I gotta stop the music at some point.
I mean,
Okay.
if you want. This is where it gets
That's
really
just-
good. We're getting jazzy. This is where we'd all like get really low on the dance floor.
I would just drop my hands from here to here. That's
Yeah.
Don't forget the jazz hands!
Those aren't spirit fingers. These are spirit fingers.
Warm fuzzies.
if nothing
We have
else.
fun.
We have fun.
Thank you, Juliana. You're so
Thank you.
profound.
Thank you. I'm gonna stop recording.